All right, buyers, I am talking to you again. This is going to be about the 10-day sprint that you have once you go under contract. I know this might seem obvious that it's very demanding the first 10 to 15 days, and depending on what city and state you're in, the inspection period number of days will change. But in Arizona, it's 10 days. In Florida, it's 15 days. And as much as I try to explain this to people, I think once they're actually going through it is when it hits them and they're like, wow, I didn't expect it to be this intense, because you still have real life. You still have your job and you still have your kids, and you might be on vacation or traveling for work. And it typically happens, everything happens at once. I don't remember which law that is, but everything happens at once, which means you already have like an intense life, and then you go under contract, and now I need you to get to the bank. I need you to schedule the inspection period. And then we might have to schedule the inspection, and then we might have to have more inspections, and then you have to make some decisions. So I just want to go through this step by step so that you can understand what happens and at least be a little bit more prepared if you've never done this before or you haven't done it in 15 years, because I know that there's a lot of questions that go around this. So you go from waiting to everything happening at once. What does that mean? It means that buyers think that finding the house is the hardest part, the most important part, is the most tedious part, but it's actually not. Once you have a fully executed contract between the buyer and seller, contract acceptance is today, and the inspection period starts the next day. So the two things that are super important are earnest money and scheduling the inspection. We'll start with earnest money. Earnest money is typically deposited into or given to the title company within 1 to 2 business days. So if this happens on a Friday night or a Saturday, Monday would be your first business day. Your earnest money would need to be at title Tuesday at the latest. If it happens on a Thursday, especially a Thursday night, I feel like this has been happening a lot lately. As a buyer, you kind of want to get your money there on Friday. You can linger till Monday, but there's going to be a lot of questions from the seller's rep saying, hey, where's the earnest money? Is that going to be deposited on Monday? Because you have to remember, your earnest money is a physical deposit, but it's your actual credibility. And that's what I think people miss, is that they just think, oh, I'll just get it there when I can. This is your skin in the game. That's why sometimes you will see that sellers counter the buyer with a higher earnest money deposit. And typically under $1 million, it's 1%. It's 1% of the purchase price. And I feel like as things have evolved over the years, sellers are countering the amount of earnest money that they want from a buyer to be put into escrow more often. That means that more things are happening. I mean, the contract gets longer every year. So that means that things are happening at a high rate, and they have to be added into the contract, right? So in case you don't understand what earnest money is, we'll just make it easy. Earnest money is the amount that a buyer deposits to the lawyer or the title company that is on the contract, and that is rolled into your down payment. Good Lord. So if your down payment's $50,000 and you gave $5,000, the only remaining amount is $45,000 because you already paid $5,000 upfront. So the earnest money is only at risk if we miss deadlines. If you don't miss any deadlines, the earnest money is not at risk. So the inspection period. The inspection period is 1 to 10 days. Is up to 10 days in Arizona. And again, it's 15 days in Florida. In Florida, I find that there's a lot of buyers who submit less than 15 days, which if there isn't another contract on the table, I don't know why anybody would shorten their inspection period. When you submit your inspection request, the buyer is ending their inspection period. But to automatically just negotiate against yourself and say, okay, I'm going to go from 10 days to 7 days or from 15 days to 10 days. I'm not really sure why anybody would do that, to be honest. I know the sell side wants it because they want to put some pressure on you to make sure that you get it done and move the transaction along. But the buyer has 15 days legally. So take it. That's my advice. Take it. All right. So we want to schedule an inspection immediately or as quickly as possible because an inspector is typically booked at least 2 to 3 days out. And if they're busy, we're going to 4 to 5 days. And if your inspection period is 10 days, hear me out, and you get your general inspection on the 6th or 7th day, let's pretend one of those days is a Thursday, you receive the report back on a Friday, well, you now are into the weekend. And if your inspection period ends on a Sunday, you have 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, that you might not be able to get vendors out. You might not be able to get a report back on a Saturday or Sunday if you had an inspection on a Friday and you need that quote. It has to be strategic, and it needs to be very well understood. The other thing that buyers need to be informed about are holidays. The most intense time of the year of going under contract would be Christmas Eve. I just went through this. Christmas Eve, they went under contract, which means the due diligence, the inspection period started on Christmas Day, the 25th. Well, December 26th of 2025, President Trump made December 26th a federal holiday. So I had to factor that in. And because this was a Thursday, December 25th was a Thursday, Friday was out, Saturday was out, Sunday was out, because it was going into that week between Christmas and New Year, so companies were closed. So our inspection period ended up on like calendar days, ended up being like 2.5 weeks, because New Year's Eve day is a half day. New Year's Day is off, right? So now we already are at 6 days that haven't counted. I mean, it was so wild. And then you have all the different companies who are typically closed the week of Christmas and or the week of New Year's, and people don't come back till that Monday. So we had this inspection period that was 2.5 weeks on calendar, but because of the holidays and people being closed and now new federal holidays that got put into place, we ended up having our 10 days, again, 2.5 weeks out. So it's really important as the buyer to understand how Easter, Good Friday, like all these things, how they impact your time schedule. And I think your real estate agent really should be seasoned and explain to you and sit down with you and go over it. If it's like the middle of June where nothing's impacted, then you don't really have to worry about it, right? But 4th of July is a big one. The 3rd, the 5th, who's taking what off, when's the office open? There's just a lot of planning that goes into it. And if you don't calculate it properly, you as the buyer are the one who's going to be shortchanged. So I know that was a big tangent, but it's actually really important. So we use the inspection period to get all of our quotes, to have the inspections, to understand the health of the house, how it operates. We can ask as many questions to the HOA, to vendors. We're trying to understand what we're walking into, because as much as we're excited and we're emotionally attached to this house, we don't really know what's going on. We've never lived in it. We've never owned it. We don't know the history of anything in the house except for what the seller is telling us. And the seller's job is to disclose, but it's only going to be to the best of their knowledge. And we can't prove if it is to the best of their knowledge. So the inspection period is for everything that you want to find out about the house. Like, the buyer needs to verify all facts and figures. I also have a video on this, so feel free to watch. The importance of doing your own due diligence and not relying on a real estate agent or the seller. Very important. If you have a cash deal going, it's actually really easy. Once you get through the inspection period, the deal is pretty much done. We're just waiting to close. You don't have any more contingencies. If you have a loan, we have to schedule the appraisal. We also have to work on the inspection items, and if that comes back in a credit, because if it comes back in a credit, that's one thing. But if it comes back as price reduction, that's another thing. And if it comes back as, I'm thinking about the credit. Sorry, I'm on the tail end of being sick, so I'm just trying to keep it together. Okay, so if the seller is going to be giving the buyer a credit and the buyer is getting a loan, depending on the credit amount, the buyer actually has to get permission from the lender to get that certain amount. So my workaround for this is, if you're needing a roof that costs $25,000 and the lender says, no, we can't give you $25,000, it won't look right, or whatever, throws the numbers off, whatever the reason, you can have the title company send the proceeds from the seller of $25,000 to the vendor. And that's one way to work around it. I highly suggest that you don't order the appraisal until you are through the inspection period, because an appraisal costs money. You can't return it. Once you have the appraisal, there's nothing more you can do, and you don't get the money back if the house cancels. So you want to make sure you are through the inspection period prior to ordering the appraisal. So there's a lot of decision fatigue. There's a lot of uncertainties. We're looking at the items from the HOA, all of the HOA docs. We're looking at the seller disclosure. We're looking at the preliminary title report. The buyer should be reading these things. I know it's boring, but the buyer should be reading most of these things and having an understanding of the HOA community, if that's applicable, of the title report, of the seller disclosure. You don't just read through it once and yeah, I glanced at it. Although the seller disclosure is not for the buyer to sign off on saying that they approve of it, it is a signature to say, I received it, read it, and acknowledge that I got it. So it is really important that we're not just signing off on these things as the buyer, that you actually review them. And I know you're going to have questions, and you always will. And I know it's easier to go ask somebody, but especially with HOA docs, I highly suggest asking the HOA. When it comes to the title report, you can call the title company. That's what they're there for. And like I said, this is decision fatigue, because you're doing a lot on top of real life, and it's all new. There's a learning curve, and it's not until you're through it that you realize, oh, okay, that actually, I could have done this better. And I think it's once you settle into the house and you have an understanding of life in this home and in this area and in this neighborhood, then you will have the hindsight of 2020, which is, oh, I should have asked this, I should have asked this, but we don't have that. And so it's not really complicated, it's just compressed. And that's why it feels like a sprint. And I hope I'm doing a good job of laying all of this out, because I feel like I'm talking a lot and giving a lot of information. And this can be what the first 10 to 15 days feel like. So the deadlines are real and they are binding. We have the inspection contingency deadlines, the loan contingency deadlines, and the appraisal deadline, if you're getting a loan. And if you're not, then if you're just paying cash, then you've got your 10 days and that's it. You're locked in. Otherwise, the seller keeps your earnest money. So this all happens extremely fast. I want to just really make sure that you understand that you can blow everything off. And if you catch something before you close, you don't get to go back and change your mind. You're locked into the deal. So also keep in mind that anything that's delayed, it delays everybody in the net of the transaction. So we have the buyer, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, the title company, and the lender. And that is a lot, because everybody's on hold. Everybody's going to be working hard to remedy whatever it is that is causing the delay. It's a roller coaster. This is an emotional roller coaster. I have a whole video on the emotions of a buyer, because it happens due to the pressure, the time pressure that we have. And it's normal to have everything to go from excited to stressed to doubt to uncertainty to feeling totally secure that you chose the right house and you got through it. I just gave this piece of advice to a buyer who was really having a tough time with the seller and the seller's agent, because we kind of feel like we can't figure out where the snag is. Is the snag the seller, or is the snag the seller's real estate agent? The seller overpaid for this property, and the seller's representative, the real estate agent, we've tried to have conversations with him, both with my buyer, so it's been the three of us, and as well as me having this conversation alone. And the comparable sales, the closed sales, do not warrant the price that they are asking. It's like literally almost $1 million overpriced. Okay. And when I spoke to the seller's agent and trying to understand where's the seller coming from, other than the fact that he doesn't want to lose money because he overpaid, I was explaining to him that the buyer is looking at what's closed, and I have talked to all of the real estate agents to understand why it got to the closing price that it did, because the closing prices were extremely low compared to where they listed, and they were all listed for like 3 years. This is a land deal, and this is a complicated land deal. And so When I spoke to the seller's representative, he said, Lauren, the seller doesn't care about comps. And I'm like, well, he should. That is literally the history of the property. And the reason I bring this up is because we want to know what we're walking into on the house, or in this case, the land. But we also want to know what we're walking into with the personalities and we'll just leave it at that. The personalities and the demeanors of the other side, of the seller and the seller's agent, which is why it's so important for your real estate agent as the buyer to make some phone calls, establish themselves, start talking to that real estate agent, understand like, where is the seller coming from? Because in some cases, let's pretend that you are a buyer who's contingent. Some real estate agents are going to say, nope, our client's not going to be interested in that. And others are like, oh yeah, that's no problem. Bring it. Just submit the offer. No problem. Oh, hey, we need an extension. We didn't go under contract as fast as we thought. Oh, no problem. We'll give you 10 extra days. I mean, I don't know if that's the buyer the seller's agent just being cool, or if like the first agent just didn't want to deal with it. So she automatically shuts it down. We don't know what we're dealing with. And everybody kind of has a little bit of a selfish motive when it comes to this real estate transaction. And so I think that when you have all of this perfect storm hitting you, it's really easy for a buyer to just feel dizzy and their head is spinning and they don't really know who to look to because they're not overly prepared to go under contract. They want the house. And wow, I totally got off track. The reason why I said all that, if you're even still listening to this, is because the advice I gave to my client on that difficult land is that do not let the 30 days ahead of you ruin the years you're going to have in the house. I want you to overcome the obstacles, the hurdles, the emotional distress that you may feel when you're in the moment of it, when you're in the thick of it, when you're under contract, when you're trying to get to the finish line. There's a lot. And I think that uncertainty and that doubt, when it creeps in, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why do I think I can do this? Who do I think I am? Why do I think I want this house? I probably could find something easier. All of this is totally normal. And I don't want those 30 days to stand in the way of you finding a home that suits you best and that works for you. It's just a quick thing. And my job as your real estate agent is to make sure that you are getting the least amount of doubt and uncertainty and fear to hit you as possible, because I am your shield. I am answering all of the questions. I am taking on the brunt, the beatings, literally the verbal beatings from the other agent. And I have lots of stories there recently. My God, that has been a rough one. And I have to do my best to move my client, the buyer or the tenant in some cases, along saying, this is what the contract says. This is what we need to do in order to get to the finish line. And I can only lead the horse to water. I can't make the buyer submit the escrow on a certain time, but it really does. It forces the seller to lose credibility with you. They're now saying, well, what do I do? And it makes them so tense, I would say, that when you go ask for inspection repairs, they're not willing to help you. You kind of screwed them up front, and now they don't want to help you. So there's a really important piece of this that the real estate agents need to get along, and then the buyer and the seller need to get along through the real estate agents. So there's a lot of pieces that go into this, and I want every buyer to have a great experience because I hear about so many buyers who don't. I hear about so many sellers who don't. And I did sit down one day, and then I'm going to wrap this up. And I asked God to give me my understanding of like, why am I so heavy into my real estate job? And he gave me 3 words: protect, guide, and assist. And that was it. I want to protect people from the future of spending too much money or making a bad investment. I want to help people have a great experience. Like, it's 30 days and they're very intense. And I want you to have a really good quality experience. And I know that's my job because I'm your guide. You're relying on me for so many things. And I feel bad when I have to go back and tell my client, you really need to make the phone calls to the solar company, to the HOA, whoever, because I want to do that for you. But I'm not the buyer. I don't have as much power as the buyer does to call to the HOA and say, hey, the patio is under construction. I'm closing in 30 days. I want this done by then. Can you move my unit to the front of the line True story. So that I can close on this because the lender won't close. True story. Yes, ma'am, I will do that for you, right? That gets done because you're the buyer. So as much as I want to do everything for you to protect you, because you're like my little baby, I can't do it. I can't do it for you, but I will do my best to protect you as much as I can. And part of that is explaining this up front so you understand what you're about to get into when you go under contract. And you should be excited. To be honest, you should be very excited, and just take a moment, take some deep breaths, go through the inspection, ask for what it is you want. Ask yourself, in 3 years, will this $3,000 that I'm stuck on right now, will that matter? Probably not. If you love the house, you don't care. If you don't love the house, then yeah, don't spend the $3,000. I don't know, but nobody can make that decision for you. So anyway, this has been way more juicy than I intended. So thank you for listening to it. And I would love to hear any questions that buyers have. I've already gotten a little bit of hate from some shorts that I put out about how this is like such common sense, but I actually don't think it is. So if you're not buying and selling real estate often, I really hope that this helped you, because we got a lot in there. So thank you for listening as always, and I will see you on the next one.